Hello, everyone. Welcome to another pre-show. Gather round.
Gather round indeed and look at their springtime attire, although it's getting skimpier, so I think summer is probably approaching.
Summer is, I can confirm, summer is approaching.
And we'll all go together where the wild mountain thyme grows around the blooming heather. Won't you go, lassie, go?
Yes.
Well, that's good. If my true love shoe were gone, I would surely find another where the wild mountain thyme grows around the blooming heather. Will you go, lassie, go?
All right. I
Well,
was
I'm just asking.
contemplating doing a lyric battle with you, but I decided better. I,
Yeah, better.
I'm above that. I'm above small-minded competitions.
Small-minded competitions. Is
Yeah.
that what you're saying?
Yes.
Really? Really?
No,
All
I'm
right.
above. We're both above it, apparently, right? So good for
Are
us,
we?
right?
Are we?
Good for. Oh, are you not? I mean,
Speak
it's
for
great
yourself,
up here,
white man.
Charles. Don't you want to join me up here in my
Let
lofty?
me tell you, your lofty heights. You know, it's funny you say that because I so well remember once, speaking of the mountains, on top of Old Smoky, all covered with snow, I lost my poor sweetheart for courting so slow. Now, courting's a pleasure, courting's a grief, but a false hearted lover is worse than a thief. For a thief, he will rob you and steal what you have, but a false hearted lover will put you in your grave.
Is that how that goes?
Yeah. The version you know, of course, is on top of spaghetti, all covered with cheese. I lost my poor meatball when somebody sneezed. It rolled off the table and onto the floor, and then my poor meatball rolled out of the door.
The version I heard of that song is on unconstant lover. An
Mm.
unconstant lover. Okay, I guess it got changed around a little bit. That word.
Well, folk songs usually do. They usually have
Interesting.
different versions because they're folk songs.
Yeah.
They're not copywritten.
Okay.
So
Oh,
anyway,
copywritten. I'm gonna copyright this. Wow, that's a
I'm
good
gonna
point.
copyright this folk song. Hang down your head, Tom Dooley. There now you can only sing. You can only sing the
Yeah.
authorized words.
That's ridiculous. I'm sorry. That was perfect, Charles. That was a perfect example.
I'm gonna copyright the words to it. And if you see it wrong, you pay a fine. It's
Oh
not
man.
this time tomorrow. It's next time tomorrow. Get him, officer. All right, moving on now. You heard the man. You wanted for lyric infringement. What are you talking about? It's an ancient folk song. Ancient folk song, may I? Thing was copyrighted in 1959. Now move along.
Well, isn't that I mean, Happy Birthday got like copyright, like right? Because like
Yeah,
restaurants
because
couldn't do that anymore.
no, they couldn't because Happy Birthday was actually written and had an author. It wasn't a folk song.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Happy Birthday was I don't know. Let me see who the author was. Uh, Happy Birthday
I mean,
lyrics.
but it's just saying like happy birthday 3 times basically, and then happy birthday to you and happy birthday dear so and so. I guess there's a
Uh,
tune to it too, but
there is. Let's see. Happy Birthday copyright. We'll see.
yeah.
Yeah, here we go. No, it's now in the public domain again.
Hmm.
That's why you hear it these days. But it says the song here. Oh my, oh my, oh my, oh.
Hmm.
Lordy, lordy, lordy. All right, it was published in 1893 by Clayton F. Summey, and the songwriters were Patty Hill and Mildred J. Hill. Uh, The song is in the public domain in the United States and the European Union. Warner Chappell Music had previously claimed copyright on the song in the U.S. and collected licensing fees for its use. In 2015, the copyright claim was declared invalid, and Warner Chappell agreed to pay back $14 million in licensing fees. That was a lot of money back in 2015.
Wow, that's weird law where it's like it looks like the law's on your side, but it ends up not, and now you have to like pay back.
Yeah, well, that's what happens when you got millions of bucks and you really squeeze people.
Okay, because that happened too, where I have wondered because in restaurants they were singing it again, and it's like, oh, okay, well,
that's why.
Glad we got past that.
Yeah, we've gotten past that with those people. Yeah, it's true. We're better off now. We've gone through a bit of self-discovery. We've become more accepting of ourselves, of who we are, what we are, and why we are. And I think, given what we're doing now, who we've become, where we are, yeah.
Is that your California person impression?
Yeah, pretty much. And I think it's true. I mean, I don't, because, yeah, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
I just think that because it's just, yeah.
All right. Are you ready for the questions?
Born ready.
All right. Layla has 2 questions. She says, is Tenebra supposed to be morning or night? I'm so confused.
Good question. The answer is both. Ha 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 ha. I'll explain. Tenebrae began life as a morning prayer thing for Maundy Thursday, Holy Saturday, Monday, Thursday, Good Friday, and Holy Saturday. But over time, the vigil slipped back over Saturday into the morning. The Good Friday service slipped back into the morning. Maundy Thursday slipped back into the morning. And the Tenebrae service slipped back to the previous night. So you would attend what was basically the Maundy Thursday Tenebrae service on Wednesday night, Spy Wednesday. You were attending the Good Friday on Maundy Thursday and the Holy Saturday on Good Friday. So everything got pushed back a day. Then in 1955, with the new rites of Holy Week, everything was shoved forward again, and Tenebrae followed. So nowadays, in places that do the post 55, they tend to do Tenebrae in the morning. In the places that do the 54, they do it in each case the previous evening. But that's why it's that way.
All right. Layla also asks, what is Mr. Coulombe's insight on Will Durant's The Story of Civilization?
That's an interesting question. Will Durant was French-Canadian. He was from Worcester, Mass. He lost his faith at a relatively early age, and then there was a big scandal. He was teaching at a girls' school, and he ended up having an affair with one of his students who was Jewish, and they later got married, and they became the famous team of Will and Ariel Durant. Now, like most fallen away Catholics, he had kind of an axe to grind against the church. And you'll see it in the Story of Civilization series. There's got a lot of snidery as far as the Catholic Church goes. But an interesting thing happened after they finished it in the last few years of his life. He actually came back to the church. And the man who brought him back was James Francis Cardinal McIntyre.
Wow. Do you know him?
Yeah, he was my confessor.
I know. I just thought I knew it was hanging there, so it's like, okay, Let's
So
do it.
basically, you knew the elephant was in the room, and you basically shot it.
I shot it dead.
You shot the elephant in the room.
Oh
All right,
man.
that's fine. I don't care if the Audubon Society doesn't go after you. I'm not going to.
Wow. So, I mean, you say that. So, like,
I didn't have to say it.
no, no. I mean, I kind of want to unmap that or unpack that a little bit because.
Well, I mean, I'll give you an example. When they're dealing with the 18th century, and they're describing Naples, one of your two Italian ancestral cities. They describe it as priest-ridden and having a phony miracle, meaning the liquefaction of the blood of St. Januarius.
Oh, right.
And it's filled with that kind of gratuitous, nasty remark. I'm going to let you all in on a little secret. You may notice that I do the same thing in my writing. In my historical writing, I make the same kind of gratuitous cracks.
Oh yeah, Paul Revere was detained early in the night on Puritan's Empire. I always remember that.
Yeah. Well, I make those gratuitous remarks. I was inspired by Will Durant.
Wow.
I mean, not alone, because that's always been the general liberal style of writing. But that is why I put in those gratuitous cracks, because for decades and decades, liberal historians have done that. Historians of our sort do not, as a rule. But I do, because I figure if it's good for the moron, it's good for the semi-moron. So I don't mind doing it. And I have to admit, an individual whom you and your beloved wife know in the literary world, I won't say who, is a friend of mine too. But he did me the favor after reading several of my books of saying that I don't write like anybody on our side. And my response to him was, "You're right, I don't." I said, "I write like a liberal." There's a long pause, and he looks at me and he goes, "You're right. That's exactly what it is. You write like a liberal." I said, "Yeah." And see, they won. They formed what passes for the modern mind. So I'm a great believer in despoiling the weaponry of the Assyrians and smashing their heads with it, to use a biblical reference.
Nice. No, what I was gonna say was, how is it known that Cardinal McIntyre gets full attribution for that conversion?
Well, I mean, apart from his telling me.
No. Well, even if he's telling you, I mean, did he say something? Because, like, no, I mean, seriously, like when people, people all the time say, thank you guys on the show, Charles. You've been a huge influence. But it's not like full attribution. I mean, I believe you, but I just wanted to know how a person can claim full attribution for someone else's conversion. I'm just curious.
When the other person tells them.
Okay.
And the thing is that Will Durant, they met several times before Cardinal McIntyre really started going to work on him. And the funny thing about that was that he began his onslaught not with the usual stuff that Durant was used to, pushing aside, but saying that it was really too bad that he couldn't find a chick his own age.
Cardinal, wait.
He didn't say chick, but no.
Why is it too bad?
Why?
Yeah, well, I mean, like, okay, so Cardinal McIntyre says, "Oh, it's really too bad you couldn't find a chick your own age." But why is that bad, spiritually speaking, in the big picture? Like, what is that? I mean, is that just frivolous talk?
It was frivolous. It was meant to be frivolous. It was meant to be, because, see, Durant was all set. He had all his personal defenses up. So the trick was to come up with a phrase from left field that he wasn't expecting.
Well, okay, that's good. That's great.
It's called shock value. I mean, for instance, if you know me as the great monarchist, and you're all set with all kinds of anti-monarchist arguments, and I say, isn't it great that we're run today by the very best people that ever lived? That's not the ground you were ready to fight on.
Mm.
And what it might just do, what it could possibly do, is have you look at the whole thing in a different light.
Wow. That's not 1-to-1 because it's still in like the area of, like, I feel like your example is more in the area of combat, whereas Cardinal McIntyre's is really in left field. It's not here or there. It's just like,
no. But the thing was, it was intended to get around his defenses.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
And see, again, especially when you're dealing with intellectuals, you've got to remember that every intellectual, so-called, has a whole structure of thought in his head.
Yeah.
And he's used to taking blows and passing them back. So the question is, how do I get around all that? And get him to look at something from a different perspective than he's had.
Well, I always feel like Catholic arguments, especially like pro-life arguments, are really effective in that sense, because I don't think liberals have thought in certain terms.
Well, I don't know. Yeah. I mean, honestly, I it's why I always call abortion infanticide and living together shacking up.
Yeah.
Because they're not used to thinking of it in those terms.
Yeah, I see.
And I've had people say things to me like, "Well, it's not about the infant, because if it were, we'd have provision for the children the infants to be taken care of, and all this free stuff for them, and blah blah blah." My response is, I see. So you could make the same argument about the emancipation of the slaves. The people who were really in favor of emancipation, they would have provided all sorts of means for the slaves to be taken care of, employment and training and all that, rather than just freeing them.
Wow. That's very clever. One last question before we move on. If Will Durant hated the church so much, what is he doing always talking to Cardinal McIntyre?
Well, that's a good question. They met by chance at some function or other. And Durant was very much taken with McIntyre's patter. I mean, the Cardinal, I speak from experience, was a fascinating man. He knew all kinds of stuff. He was very well educated. And he was able to talk about all kinds of things that Durant was simply amazed that he knew about. And again, he had such a paradoxical way of speaking. I mean, I'll give you an example from memory. The Cardinal and I were talking, I must have been about 15 or 16, and he says, says he, the Italians are always better in their own country. And I said, really, Your Eminence? Well, how about the French Canadians then? He says, oh, you people are always particularly better in your own country. And I said, really? Well, then how about the Irish Americans, Your Eminence? And he looks at me and he sort of rolled his eyes and he said, The vast majority of the bishops and ranking priests of this country are Irish American, and that's the nastiest thing I could say about anybody. So,
gosh, wow! I mean, gosh.
Yeah, there's nothing you can do with that.
Yeah, there.
You know, when he bags on his own people, you can't be angry. You can't be resentful. You're just sort of, well, okay.
Wow, what a fascinating man.
He was. He really, really was. And he had a vision for Los Angeles as the great Catholic city of the 21st century.
Ooh.
It's why, I mean, for instance, the Doheny collection that La Cardinal Mahoney sold at, a tenth of its value, that Cardinal McIntyre saw as the core of a collection of Catholic, a museum of Catholic culture that would really put its mark on Los Angeles as a Catholic city.
I've never heard that term before. Doheny collection? What is that? A collection of relics?
Relics, artwork, books, all sorts of stuff that Countess Doheny, Estelle Countess Doheny, had gathered over the years. And when she made her will, she was going to leave it all to the church. This is in the late 60s, but he could already tell that things were going south. So he suggested to her that she put a 25-year block on the archdiocese getting control of the collection. So she did, and then she died in 1975. Well, 25 years later, Cardinal Mahoney was running the show. And as soon as he got his hands on it, he sold everything at a tenth its actual value. And for quite a while afterwards, you'd see all sorts of Catholic objet d'art and antique stores and all that, all bought, cheap from the Doheny collection.
Well,
wow, indeed.
No, I was gonna say he probably needed money from all the
Well, this was
half
before
a billion. That. Oh, half. Well, okay.
No, this was before that. This was before any scandal. He just, I mean, it was, and then, for one thing, the Cardinal was a great patron. Remember that during this time, he becomes Archbishop in 1948, and he stays in until 1970. Well, during that time, the church in Los Angeles exploded in numbers as Catholics came from all over the country and the world. And in those days, by the way, Orange County was part of the LA Archdiocese. Oh. So he was very anti-communist, and he welcomed emigres from the captive nations, which is why the Norbertines settled in Orange County. Because remember, they were Hungarian refugees.
Interesting.
He was a big friend of the Eastern Rites. And actually, despite his comments about Italians and French Canadians, he loved ethnic parishes because they reminded him so much of home, of New York, because he was a New Yorker. Yeah. So one of the things that was pointed out to me years ago at St. Peter's Italian Church downtown is that when Cardinal McIntyre was running the show, he always came to St. Joseph's Table. Always. Which, Cardinal Mahoney never did. And he was like that. I mean, Lithuanians came to Silver Lake. He put together St. Casimir's Church for them. He was very, very like that. He founded the St. John Bosco Institute, which I'm sure you've heard of.
Sure. I have plenty of friends who graduated from there. It's very reputable.
It's reputable, but he actually founded it with the idea of creating a Catholic labor leadership.
Oh.
And that was the reason why he worked so closely with the Catholic Labor Institute in LA, which you may remember after his time, like so many Catholic institutions that deal with politics, got cozy with pro-abortion politicians. Well, Cardinal Manning had no problem with that. Cardinal Mahoney had no problem with that until 2 or 3 years into his reign, the ununionized workers at the Catholic cemeteries decided that they wanted to form a union. Well, Mahoney exploded and threatened to fire them all. The Catholic Labor Institute declared that they were backing the workers. So the cardinal declared that they'd been having pro-abortion politicians at their prayer breakfasts, and he could have nothing to do with them because they were pro-abortion.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a difficult, perhaps one of the most difficult questions that you've ever received. What is the best decision that Cardinal Mahoney ever made?
Stepping down.
Other than that. I know that's coming. I know. Okay. Because from everything I know, it's literally like the absolute worst like way you can go on everything.
He was very consistent that way.
Yeah. It's just like breathtaking, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, there was something. There was something. I don't remember what it was. And I'm not being funny or disingenuous, because I was working for the National Catholic, not the National Catholic Register. I was working for the Lay Catholic Mission, and he did something that we backed him up on.
Yeah.
I don't remember what it was. It was probably some political thing. That he got guff for it, and we backed him up on it.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
But I don't remember what it was. It's a long time ago. And as you say, when you think of him, all you can think of is the terrible stuff.
Yeah. So, I also too, it's just like the scope is so wide that usually, it's like, okay, we've got some heresy here, we've got some, molestation here, or whatever. But like the entire scope of the function of a cardinal is so wide that you figure he's got to hit something decent, but I haven't seen it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, as I say, he stood up against somebody for something, but I don't remember what it was.
Okay.
And we backed him up. And that, I mean, when we thought he was right, this was a big misconception that there was about the paper in the Archdiocese at the time, was that we were simply out to bag on it. That wasn't true.
Yeah.
We did everything we could to find positive stuff coming out of it.
Yeah.
And it was hard. Every now and then there'd be something, but it wasn't easy.
Okay.
Very sad.
Yeah. Let's see. Tom says, piggybacking off of Charles's tour through Louisiana, I'm wondering if he enjoys Walker Percy's writing, and if so, what are his top 3 characters?
Oh boy. Well, yes, I do. And to answer your question, my favorite is Lancelot, the character in the title, the book of the same name, the lead character. The lead character of the moviegoer, of course. But my favorite Walker Percy book is not actually any of his novels, much as I've enjoyed them. It is The Lost in the Cosmos, the last self-help book, which is very, very funny. It's a send-up of self-help books that were very popular in the 80s. They're very Catholic and very funny and very very skewery.
All right. Micah says, Charles, I'm attempting to research the House of Wittlesbach more. In particular, I am attempting to ascertain the royal wedding traditions not only of the Catholic monarchs, but of the House of Wittlesbach specifically. What cathedral and under what diocese did the Wittlesbach royals marry in, and what were the celebrations and rites of the occasion?
Well, Munich was the archdiocese, the diocese. I don't know of any of the specific rites, although I'm sure if you look up Wittlesbach and Heirat, on Google, you'll find something. I believe they were married in the Theatinerkirche, which I think is the Hofkapelle, the court chapel in downtown Munich. I believe that's right. I could be wrong.
Okay. Wade says, I'm looking to take a trip to Madeira to pay tribute to Blessed Emperor Karl. First, is there scheduled mass at the church he is entombed? If so, where are the listings for times? Second, while there, what are some of the best places to enjoy the stay for eating or taking in the local scenery? What else would be excellent to know for anyone who is a first-time visitor to the island? Thank you.
Well, you've got to bear in mind, I was only there for a very, very short time, and I didn't get the chance to see all that much. But the church is Nossa Senhora de Montes. Go to their website, and they'll give you the times. There's a restaurant right across the street from them, which is nice enough. Then downtown in Funchal, the cathedral and the Jesuit church are lovely and worth seeing. Reed's Palace Hotel is the place to go. There are a number of other restaurants scattered around, which I enjoyed. Can't think of any names right now, but definitely Reed's Hotel. There's a lot to see there, but I didn't get the chance to see much.
Okay. Question from Nicholas, who says, hello, gentlemen. I was wondering if Charles knows which regions of India were the most loyal to Britain, and if there were any parts of India that still had large populations that wished to remain part of Britain when India was gaining independence from the empire.
Well, I mean, the major cities like Bombay and Calcutta and Madras had people who would have probably preferred Dominion status. And then there are certain towns like Bangalore where there are a lot of Anglo-Indians who would probably have preferred that India stay British.
What's underneath that decision? Like, they would prefer this because...
Well, I mean, the thing about being Anglo-Indian is that when the British left, you were suddenly villainized as a remnant of colonialism. And that's obviously not fun. I mean, let's pretend for a minute that California became a part of Mexico. And English speakers were regarded as remnants of the old regime and found it difficult to get ahead economically, to get decent jobs, etc. In other words, that they were sort of frozen out. They wouldn't appreciate it very much.
Wow.
And of course, the same, in fact, happened when California came under the American regime.
That's a good example.
Well, I mean, you know, when listen, I'm French Canadian, and the conquest is the defining thing in our history. All of our, you know, every ethnicity, every people have certain cultural internal quirks as a result of their history. With us, the conquest put a huge chip on our shoulders. And I feel it myself. I'd be lying if I said I didn't. It's not something I sit around and think about. And you'll understand, as a man of French Canadian descent, but born in New York, raised in LA, living in Austria, that chip on my shoulder is a weird thing to have because, you know, what do I do with that? What does that mean? Am I supposed to hate the Anglos? But then I don't live in Quebec. I might feel differently if I did.
Interesting. All right. JD asks, does any sort of sarcasm violate the rule, let your yes mean yes?
Yes. Badly executed sarcasm where people don't realize you're being sarcastic. If you're not good at sarcasm, don't use it. The whole point of sarcasm is that you say something that's plain and obvious to anybody with half a brain. But some people can't carry it off, so don't. But I remember your brother had a job in a company. I don't want to say where it was, but it was in Monrovia, California. And sarcasm was forbidden in the office because, and I quote, it contains truth, which is hurtful.
Wow.
Ask Steve about that.
That's fascinating. But even in good sarcasm, if you're, it's like, oh yes, that doesn't necessarily mean yes then. So doesn't that, by the letter of the law, violate?
Only if you're autistic.
Don't do that. People complain. Don't.
If you complain, you're on the spectrum.
Okay, you've gone off the rails, and you need to be silenced.
In the name of free speech.
I disavow.
No, I mean, it's funny. I was talking to a friend of mine today who is autistic, and he made the point that autists can't really choose to be that way. But it's as though so many people online choose to act and behave in an autistic manner.
Right.
It says, I've got an excuse. I was born this way.
Yeah.
And there's so much the ease with which people take offense today is in fact rather autistic. And you know where it comes from?
What?
It's all about me.
Hmm.
In other words, one of the most difficult things for an autistic person to really realize is that everybody else is going through their own dramas that are not about you or not about me.
Yeah.
It's their own thing. So an autistic person will tend to take anything personally because he can't wrap his head around usually, or if it takes a while for him to learn to do this, to wrap his head around the fact that other people are doing their thing. And if you're sort of standing there, you're not quite catching it. They have no time.
Yeah.
They just don't. Okay, that's nice, pal. I gotta go. Why did he say that to me? In all likelihood, because he was late for something and didn't have time to stand around while you figured things out.
Mm.
Well, similarly, you'll notice how people react online.
Mm. Well, let me ask you this. I don't know how you're going to answer this. This is going to be really interesting. Are you pregnant?
No.
Oh. It looks like a pregnancy stick or something. I don't know what you're showing me. Is that some spectrum? I don't know. It's not focusing.
No, it was a thing that showed I had COVID last month.
Oh, okay. I thought it was a pregnancy test.
Yeah, I failed. I failed my pregnancy test. I tried to cheat, but I
failed. No. So I'm going to do a comparison here. So you're monarchist, you look at democracy, you say, let's look at the politicians. How many are true statesmen? And it's, really the only true statesmen are the exception to the rule.
No.
Likewise, bad Catholic schools we've talked about where they're not passing on the faith well. I remember you used the metaphor, well, it's like, if nobody leaves school knowing how to spell, is it the teacher's fault or the student's fault, right?
Oh.
So let's apply this same sort of thing to the internet. Do you feel? Yeah, let's just leave it open ended. How do you feel about this? Because it seems like communication on the internet is, by and large, I want to be careful with my words here, but I feel like it's very different from real life talk, and in that sense, it diverges from real life talk in a bad way.
Well, I know what you mean, and I agree. I mean, as I've had occasion to mention before, that people whom I know, younger people whom I know, who most of their communication is on the internet.
Yeah.
When you actually talk with them, you find they're not really adept at normal speech.
Yeah.
They don't know about tonality. They don't know about emphasis. They're just sometimes they're monotone. Sometimes they're too loud. Sometimes they're too soft. And you realize that it's because of a lack of regular communication with living people from the time they were tiny, little tinies.
So again, so perhaps you're saying there needs to be more balance.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think the internet's a wonderful tool, and a lot of good stuff has come out of it. And I'd be lying if I said otherwise. But I think that especially for younger people who don't really have any memory of the before time, I think it is in some cases, not all, but in some cases, really damaging to their social skills.
I feel like the internet, especially as a marketer and somebody who engages on the other side and see what's happening on the other side in terms of advertising and some of these other things, I feel like the internet's purpose by its masters is to be an even greater trap than television.
Oh, yeah. And to be more profitable.
Yeah.
Because, you see, it's a much more intensive experience than television, just as television was more so than radio.
Yeah.
The old joke, video killed the radio star. Well,
Yeah.
internet killed the video star.
Yeah. Yes.
And now, I mean, you can binge watch, you can do all kinds of things you can't do with television. And there's the amount of material out there is just astonishing. You can spend your whole time just exploring the internet. And there's a constant demand for content, quote unquote, which is being filled. I mean, relentlessly.
But I think there's too much content because I think, especially in some areas, there needs to be mechanisms for content integrity. And unfortunately, the powers that be are going in a weird way with these independent fact checkers, quote unquote. What a bunch of crap.
Hey.
But I think there definitely needs to be, because information is so prolific, but there's not really a mechanism to,
there isn't. And even if the independent fact checkers were, shall we say, either independent or fact checking, very few people today have any real education when it comes to important things, history and so on.
Yeah.
So they're not really, even with the best will in the world, it's tough for them to actually independently check facts.
Yeah. But I mean, there's so many things. Even like I just, so many advertisements, so many headlines with clickbait. It's like, oh, these 10 secret foods might give you cancer, or there's so much predatory fearfulness.
There is a lot of that. What 15 steps do you have to take to make sure your children don't die screaming horribly over the next week?
Exactly.
And the answer is send 15 times, send money to us. And your children will never die, and you'll never grow old.
Anyhow, okay, so basically just a balance is what you're saying with the internet. It's not inherently flawed. It's just
let's put it this way, as with everything else in life, whatever flaws it has certainly can come out through mis or overuse.
Yeah.
So, get out once in a while. Go see a museum. Go to a park. Talk to people. It's. I mean, yourself, in the little community you're living in.
Yeah.
If you walk from your house about 6 or 7 blocks, it's really enchanting.
Oh yeah.
And if you gave yourself If you pulled at least a half hour away from the internet a day to do that, it'd be good.
I do that, actually. I actually did that yesterday. I like doing that on Fridays. And I'll share a little spiritual reflection that I was thinking about, and the pre-show on a nice note. Because so we're near the mountain, right? So I can really go up on the mountain, and I love views. I just love them. I love them. I love the way they make you feel, especially when you combine a view with a meditation on life, where it's like you can see the whole horizon. You can see LA. I mean, you can see 20 miles in every direction. And you just think about things like the horizon, that mist. It's so magical. It's like, what is beyond there? Like, even though I know what's beyond there, but
Your
you
imagination
think
works.
and you can see how that sort of a mountaintop view could inspire Columbus and other people, where it's like to explore that horizon, to get out of that little world. Because I was looking down at our humble San Gabriel Valley, and I thought, even within San Gabriel Valley, I was particularly thinking of my dad, and I thought, in that little square of my view, that's where 95% of his life was for 50 years.
Yeah.
And just going around in this little square.
It's true.
And there's the hospital where he died, and that was the story of his life. And so it's kind of a meditation on his humility and duty, but also to a meditation of what married men are called to do.
Yeah.
Where it's like,
yeah. And the funny thing is, I remember when he and your ma used to go to the trails. You remember?
The trails? Is that an inn, or is that what is that?
Yeah, it was an old restaurant in Arcadia.
Yeah.
And Monrovia, Duarte. Ask your mom.
Yeah.
They used to go dancing there once a week.
I never heard that before. I'm gonna write that down.
Yeah, I asked about the trails. They just loved that place.
Yeah.
I remember when they tore it down. Your parents were not especially happy.
But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, the mountaintop view is also good because it shows that the things we turn into mountains are actually a molehill. It helps you zoom out so well, and it's such a cathartic feeling to zoom out, truly, and see, well, that's, I think I'm a big deal, and all these things are big to me. I need all these life goals, but really my life is in this little spot, and that's my role in the greater world, is basically being this tiny pebble on an endless beach,
Yeah.
But it's a good feeling. It's a good feeling. All right.
Good thing. All right. So, what are we doing, and why are we doing it? That's a big question, right there.
We are wrapping up the pre-show, but we're going to be starting the full episode pretty soon. So stay tuned, because we'll be coming right at you.
Stay tuned, and remember, the darker it gets, the more bizarre it becomes. What was that even supposed to be? Was that like some message of hope or something? Because it failed, as far as I'm concerned.
I think we could turn it into some deep meaning, maybe.
I don't think it's worth it.
All right. Stay tuned, everybody.
God bless you all. We'll see you soon, gang.
All right. Bye.
Ciao.